like it's about 3 p.m. So we will get started with the City Council Budget Work Session agenda for Tuesday, January 7th, 2020. And I think we are happy to see everybody here, and thanks for being a part. We see a lot of staff who will be giving us reports today, so thanks for being here, and also to the public. We're going to start with you, Jeff.
Well, we have first on our agenda a general discussion of the budget proposal. So this is an opportunity for council to ask any other questions that you maybe didn't think to ask on Saturday, or if you all want to have some conversations about some of the recommendations in the budget that you heard from us on Saturday. Now's the time that you can do that. If there's not a desire, and there's not sufficient topics for you to cover, then staff is ready to go through the capital plan when you're ready.
I know that many of the all of the councilors have received Jeff's memo with the 4 items that we wanted him to report back on. And so if any of those items, maybe we can go through it one by one and just discuss them as a council, because these are things that we requested you to follow up on. Sure. Okay. All right, we'll do those. Okay. We'll start with number 1, aid to agency funding. And I know that HCDC Commission requested a meeting with us. Has anything been set up with that, or a proposed date?
No, we were looking first to you to make sure that you wanted to have that meeting. Okay. Assuming that you do, we would work with them. I think ideally it maybe could occur at your next work session, regularly scheduled work session. If that doesn't work for HCDC members, we're going to probably have to poll you individually and try to find a special meeting. Okay.
I think at the last budget meeting, what I suggested to councilors is that we actually wait to have the meeting with HCDC before, so that we can gather all their information, get their input verbally before maybe we go into great discussion on this item, but it's up to the councilors what they would like to do. Personally, I thought we got a census of the councilors wanting a meeting with HCDC.
Yeah, I would like to have that meeting.
Yes, that's what I recall.
Okay, so we'll aim for January, was that 21st, your next meeting? I think I said 17th in air. January 21st we'll aim for, and if that doesn't work, we'll look at the next available date.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
The second item that we wanted further report back from staff related to Forest View tenants in relationship to the double wide units and the proposed new Forest View neighborhood. I know that Jeff did submit information in the memo from, I want to say it was August.
Correct, yes. I didn't really provide any new information because there is no new information to share. We did have the request in July from the developer and the Tenants Association to move to double-wide housing units. The estimated cost, and I emphasize estimated because the developers made it clear that they don't have the exact cost yet, was about a little over $20,000 per home for a total of $1.2 million. Staff's recommendation remains the same. We encourage the developers to apply for the existing affordable housing dollars that we allocate every year, and continue to work with the Tenants Association to see how many houses need to be double wide. Is it every house? Is it 50% of the houses, 75% of the houses? But it seemed like there was a little bit more discussion that needs to be had between those two organizations before we could get a firm number. I know that the development team did submit one grant application to the trust fund that was not approved. Despite it not being approved, I think that there would be an appetite for approving that at the trust fund level if the application was strengthened a little bit. I continue to think that that's a source that needs to be fully explored before the council considers some additional significant financial incentives for this development. If you recall, in the memo mentions this, the Economic Development Committee has previously had some conversations about an infrastructure TIF for the Forest View neighborhood. So that would be for the construction of Forest View Drive and the utilities. That would be the main arterial in that subdivision. Those TIF conversations have stalled over the last few months, but we fully expect that the developer will be pursuing those. So given that that's about a $13 million roadway, the TIF is probably going to be a good portion of that $13 million as contemplated right now. Given that financial involvement in the process, again, that's why we would say let's exhaust some of these other affordable housing funding opportunities before we consider the $1.2 million.
I just want to say that I agree with you. We don't have enough information for this right now, and even though the proposal by the developer was 1.2 million, that's if all the 57 houses, because they said 20,000 per one house and times 57, that's where the 1.2 million come. And my understanding that, as you just said, this is not, we don't know how many houses need to be, will be like by any means less than the amount that they proposed, because not all the houses supposed to be wider, and that's why we really need more information in order to see whether we're going to approve this or disapprove it. We need really more information. The developer is the one who proposed the 1.2 million. I guess we have to ask them to really send us the real cost for this housing, how many houses. My understanding also, the residents who want the wider house will bunch in some money. Right now, all the houses will be like $310 a month. But if you have a wider home, they are willing to pay more than $310. And this is even will make the one house instead of $20,000 will be less than $20,000. We need all this information in order for the council to make their mind if they want to move forward to this or no, or if there is another fund available for that, and which fund we should take this out from. I agree with you, Jeff, but I hope for next meeting, we have that information, because the developer is the one who proposed that. Now we need really specific information from him so we can make up our mind.
I agree that a very important piece of the information we need is how many we actually would need for the double wide. And I wondered if you talked about the developers, have the tenants association themselves met on their own to determine how many of them would be interested in the double wides, so that we have an idea from them?
I think I'm sure those conversations have taken place, but I'm not aware of a specific number. And I don't think, based on the conversations that we've had with the development team, I don't think they're going to be prepared to give us exact cost estimates before your next meeting. I just don't think we probably won't have it, maybe even before your budget's approved.
I guess the one hope would be is we can still get maybe some more estimates. It doesn't have to be exact. I think one of the things is we can probably consider a line item if the request is still there, just so that we're not, as we've learned in the past, we get, either close to budget season or even the budget has already started and then there's a big ask. I think now is the most appropriate time for us to even consider it, because we are aware that it's been a request on some level. And so if you can navigate that a little bit and find out from the developers a direct ask as well as from the tenant association, that would be my request.
Especially this is 2021 budget. It's not like something, it's not this year or next year, the year after, which is.
The 2021 budget starts on July 1st of 2020.
21, yeah.
2020.
2020.
2020.
Yeah, I mean
So-
this is for July budget,
Right.
right?
This year.
Yes.
Yeah, which is 20 July.
I just hope that something can be done with this, because it's been over 3 years, almost 4 years now, that we've been dealing with this development, and we just really have to get moving on it.
Yeah, as a reminder, where we stand right now, the council's approved the rezoning. What needs to happen now is the council has to approve an affordable housing agreement, and that's really something that needs to be worked out between the tenants association and the developer. Those conversations don't appear to be very active right now, and we can do our best to encourage that, but as staff, we cannot speed up the pace of those discussions. It's going to take cooperation on both those parties' part, and again, those conversations aren't very active right now. So we're going to try to keep things moving, but we have limited leverage and ability in this situation.
Do we, Jeff, have any sense of the schedule for this project in terms of actually needing to purchase these homes, having a definitive idea?
No, although I can say based on the need to approve the affordable housing agreement, the presumed need to execute a TIF with the city of Iowa City, the platting process, they are 3-4 months away at best from getting all the approvals. That's a very best case scenario from getting all the approvals they need. And when you think about a development of this nature, there's a good year's worth of infrastructure work that has to take place before you can really get substantial housing and commercial properties built. So I think it's probably very unlikely at this point that we would see a new Forest View neighborhood open up or be ready for occupancy in 2020. I think 2021 would be more realistic.
I think even if they don't have the timeline exactly figured out, it'd be helpful for me to understand if this specific request that was put forward in July is still kind of the issue. If the affordable housing agreement isn't hammered down, nailed out, yet, I would like to know, is this something that's remaining? Are they expecting city action before they move forward? I would hate for us to approve something as unprecedented as this and then be told, well, there's other hurdles or there's additional requests that are going to come forward. So if we can just get some clarification on where this request sits in the context of the larger project moving forward, that'd be really helpful.
Yeah, that's sort of what I was concerned. When do we need to sign off on our commitment or lack of commitment to the housing component, or at least this piece of the housing component?
Just to provide a little more detail, we got a proposed affordable housing agreement from the developer's attorney last spring. We sent extensive comments to them in May, and also provided those comments to the Tenants Association, urged them to get counsel of their own, which they did. Their counsel provided comments. We have heard nothing from the developer, nor has the Tenants Association. So there are numerous issues that have to be ironed out before there is going to be an affordable housing agreement. But obviously, without the developer's participation, we can't do that.
So just to clarify what you just said, Eleanor, even if we approved this specific request, that doesn't resolve the issues that you're aware of in that agreement? Okay, thank you.
What was not raised, but in reading through some of the background material, the question of the park was also brought back into my attention. And when do we need to make a decision on that with respect to budget-related issues?
I don't know that there's really any budget implications for this fiscal year. Your budget, I think we can make that down the road if and when it becomes an issue. We've had that request. Staff's recommendation is to keep that private, but if council would like to make it a public park, we can work through that with the developer during those final approval stages. I don't think you need to worry about the budget here. It's a small enough parcel where if we had some maintenance time within this budget period, we'd be able to handle that.
All right, so it sounds like we'll hope for some more information at our next meeting on the 21st.
Okay.
The third item that council wanted more information on, which was presented in the memo, was related to the breakdown of costs for the temporary positions that are not being recommended to shift to permanent status. And so did you want to maybe kind of, Jeff, cover?
I can highlight that again. So this is actually an issue that first came up during last budget session, and council spent a good portion of their meeting time in 2019 breaking down this issue. Ultimately, Council has previously converted what equivalates to 4.78 staff positions to permanent status. So these used to be hourly employees, non-benefited employees, and now those duties are in permanent positions. With this budget, staff is requesting the transition of one additional FTE in our housing authority. So with your approval, that would get us to 5.78 FTEs that have been or will be converted from temporary non-benefited status to permanent benefited status. During the 2019 discussion, we offered the council a whole list of positions that we felt would qualify for permanent status. The remaining 4 positions are listed in that memo that I provided you that's in your late handouts. There's a senior center video specialist, there's library maintenance aide, maintenance worker 1, library maintenance custodian, and the recreational customer service aides. What we did is we provided you the cost of that, the estimated cost of that conversion, and then per council's request, we broke that between salary and benefits to give you an idea of what could be paid with the employee benefits levy. So the employee benefits levy can cover the benefit expense. It cannot cover the salary expense. That has to be a general fund commitment of dollars. So you can see the total cost down there is $430,000 to make those remaining conversions. We did give strong consideration to those during our budget preparation process as staff. Ultimately, we prioritized the hiring of new permanent positions, which we covered on Saturday.
I'm the one who requested that, but what I really want to say about this, salary-wise, will cost us like almost $200,000, but benefit-wise, will cost us like $240,000 almost, which is going to be from the benefit levy, and that could be like, I think, for less than 5 cents if you add it to the employee benefit levy, if I'm correct.
We did run that calc, and it was 5.7 cents for the benefit portion.
Because if 1 cent is 50.
It was between 40 and 50. It was about 42,000.
Okay. Yes, and now we're reducing the tax levy in general by 6 cents. And I think the priority of the council is not to reduce taxes. It is one of the priority, but if we're reducing last year we reduced the employee benefit levy by 10 cents, and this year, no, not 10 cents actually. 10 cents, and you increase it this year 10 cents, like we get it back 10 cents. And right now we're reducing the overall tax 6 cents. I think if we add like 5 cents to that, and we're reducing by 1 cent the tax, or maybe we can just not reduce it, like leave it as it is for the public. The public want to see reduction. They don't like to see increasing. Or if their bill like stayed the same, still no, I don't think people will start getting mad because we're paying our employees benefit. This is 5 cents additional to the employee benefit levy, and the 190, it is easy to get it from the budget. I really think that we already know some of the employees. We moved them to, we done like 4 positions, I think, or 3, Jeff. I guess 3 or 4.
That we already converted?
Yes, they already converted.
It's 4.78.
4.7, and all the people who are, when we start talking about this, all the employees who are hourly, they knew about what happened, that we moved some position to become permanent, and we said, we need to bring the rest of them back to the council during budget time. And now all those employees are looking forward. I just had a meeting yesterday with employees from the, some like rec center and some employees like from, I talked to 2 of them from the, a different department, and I find out those people, they work there for 3-4 years. And they never get benefit, and they would like to continue working there, And if people like to continue working for the city, they told me that their hours sometime become more hours when students are not here and become less hours when students are here. And those people are single mom who have children. I have also people who graduated and they still working there. They start working there when they was students and all this kind of thing. I just feel like we need, since we moved 4.7 and the other people are waiting, since we did it for some employees, we have to do it for everyone. And hopefully the council will support that. This is not going to be a lot of money from the budget because we are proposing to reduce the tax levy for, and we can just add it and still reduce it by less than 1 cent or something like that. But I really encourage we do this, and it's up to the rest.
I guess one question I have is, can we see what it would cost just as an estimate? I'm not exactly sure what all positions are being requested from temporary to permanent.
They're listed here in the memo.
The
The 4
okay.
positions right there.
Yeah, so
All
these.
those people,
Okay,
this is the cost of the salary, cost of the benefit.
okay, all right. All right. I thought there were some additional people that you were referring to.
No, I'm referring to those, I guess, the people, the new hire, the 9 point something, it is already being budgeted on the budget, my understanding, right?
It's in the
The new
proposed
hire.
budget.
Yes, it's already from the proposed budget. But those is not being budgeted.
Yeah, if I
That-
could clarify one thing, this is not an exhaustive list of our hourly employees. We have a lot more hourly positions than you see here. We went through an exercise last year. We sat down with AFSCME and we tried to identify the hourly positions that are held year-round and have a, let's say, we kind of use 20 hours per week as a benchmark. Some of these are a little less than that. But we looked at those positions and we felt that those were the best candidates for conversion to permanent status. But again, we have a lot of hourly employees that you don't see on this list. And that's what, when you're raising the minimum wage, that's who you're helping. You're helping those hourly employees who are making that wage, because all our permanent employees already make well above even $17 an hour.
I guess we're going to continue to have hourly employee. I'm not going to that. The city need hourly employee. We have seasonals, sometimes we hire more people during certain season. We still want to want that. But those people, as me said last time, this is the people that they really work in the average of 20 hours or less, average of 20 hours, I mean. That's why we need to do it. People who work around the years and being with the city for a long time, they call themselves city employees, but they are not getting some benefit. And I know there is many, many more hours employee. We can continue to have those as long as they are not working as those one. Just the best, the candidate that to be better.
What are other counselors thinking?
Well, one question I would have for Jeff would be, Jeff, if you were to prioritize the positions, those 4 positions that were not funded in your proposal, would you have any priority? If we were to fund these positions, is there any priority within those 4 that you would have?
I think probably 2 answers to that question. One, if my first priority would be hire additional permanent staff and not convert, because I think we're going to continue to get more value for the public by looking at adding staff in key positions, and even within these operations, senior center, library, and parks and recreation. I think the city would benefit more from hiring additional permanent staff in these areas and keeping these temporary. Set that aside, and if your goal is strictly to move the temporary to permanent status, I think the biggest bang for your buck is in the recreation customer service. It's also the most expensive, but there would be value. There would be value to doing that. I want to remind you, though, that there's also going to be in that particular position a number of hourly employees that don't have a job after this process, because we probably employ 20 to 30 hourly employees to meet that demand right now. And what we're saying is we would have 7 full-time equivalents. So that doesn't necessarily mean 7 full-time employees. We might have some half-time employees in there. But some of those current hourly employees would no longer have a job after this process.
Yeah, there is many students work there and they leave anyway during summertime and come back. For the rec center, I don't know, the rec center person is here, you are here, but I went there and I asked how many people work during this time, and this time I found out there is less employee during summer, which is they get more hours. And when the student, you constantly hiring again when the students come back. We just, we can just stop. If this is going to start on July, we can just start not hiring during the summertime and keep those employees. And even if the council would like to move only one position this time and leave the rest for another time, I really encourage you to do the recreation center. Those people on the front desk, they are the people who greeting the resident of Iowa City every day, just to make somebody staying there all the time and the same face, not changing. There is many problems happen sometimes at the rec center because the people don't know other people and they act like, when you get somebody there and they understand the job, they being there for a long time, and I think this have a value to the rec center. I really encourage you, even if you don't want to think about all of them. You want to do it gradually, like every year you're going to do some people permanent. You should have started with the rec center. And I was really hoping this to happen during the 4 positions that we approved. That should have been one of them because we have more people there.
Being new to this process, I think for me, what I come back to is kind of the balance overall. And I agree with taxpayers may not have the expectation that their taxes go down, but what we know with this budget proposal is there were assessments last year that I think on average went up 9%. And so even with lowering the levy, we know that people's tax bills are going to go up a very small amount, and so I'm sensitive to that. And I think the recommendation, as I understand it from staff, is to phase it in. We did the 4.8 to start with. There's an additional one in this budget, and then adding those new permanent staff, which I agree with what Jeff said. I think that's our priority. I'm very concerned with the idea of people losing their jobs based on this conversion. I think when we add new positions, then we have the opportunity to give people jobs where they know what to expect from the beginning. But this would be individuals who were hired with one understanding, then losing their job because of this conversion. So I'm not supportive of that.
I'm also new to this. One of my concerns, though, is looking at the overall budget, limited funds that we have, and looking at departments such as the fire department, which has an enormous increase in calls, but is getting, at this point, no increase in staffing, which is something of a concern. And so there's a balance in there that we have to strike. I don't know where the right place is, but I think that if we're going to look at either converting positions or adding positions, we need to look at the full universe.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with staff's recommendation. I think, we're getting the tax levy down 6 cents, and as Laura said, people's taxes, people don't pay attention to what the levy is. A lot of people don't understand the different pieces of the city and the county and the school district. They're looking at the bottom line is what they're looking at, and I think that is a real struggle for a lot of people in the community. A lot of our low and moderate income people who do happen to be homeowners struggle with that piece in terms of the extent of the property taxes. And I do agree with Jeff in terms of kind of where we get the biggest bang for our buck, if you will, in terms of permanent full-time staff. We started back in probably early 2011, not too long after Tom Marcus got here as city manager, looking at the whole staffing of the city, and over, I don't know how many year period, through attrition of all but 2 positions, we decreased the permanent full-time city staff by almost 40 people, maybe 38 or 39 people. And there was a lot of different reasons, but a lot of overlap and different things, and there was a lot of reorganization that happened as well. But when we also then look at the growth in our population in the last, say, say, 8 years, from 2010 to 2018, it's clear that we need to now start building back up very strategically that permanent full-time staff. And as we've talked lots of times about projects not getting done in the time frame that we would like to see, a lot of that's because our staff just doesn't have the capacity to do that. And so I would prefer to see the prioritization as staff has recommended with those permanent full-time, and still make that effort to reduce the tax levy as presented by the 6% and hold these off for a little bit further down the road.
This is a real serious balancing act. I do think we've, in terms of, the compensation for our city employees, we've made great advancements in terms of the hourly, moving incrementally toward 15. And I tend to be an incrementalist on this thing, that the impacts of it financially are extended over a certain period of time. So I am supportive of moving these other positions, but I do kind of want to view it as something that's done over a couple of budget seasons rather than just one. And just in terms of some of the things I've tried to initiate, I am sensitive to the fact that in some cases, I've been kind of, the staff response has been, John, we just don't have the staff time to do that. And so I'm feeling that is where there needs to be a better balance struck. And I hope my goal has always been, partly because I think it's fairly broad in its scope, is to try to keep everything advancing and maintain movement on all fronts. And in this case, it's, with new staff, transitioning some of the temporaries, together as a kind of incremental expansion.
I liked how Laura described it as phasing it in. I think John kind of alluded to that, too, that obviously I believe that personnel budget should be a priority for the city. I mean, those are our most valuable members of our staff, providing the services out there for the community and all the departments. I think Janice mentioned the fire department, and I've heard from them that a priority would be more staff. But I think one thing I've noticed you've done with a lot of these positions, as well as that, is kind of shuffling things around. Like they did get some help with the limiting the inspections aspect of it and putting that in the NDS. So that's helpful to them as far as perhaps putting more of their employees out onto the streets or on their vehicles. So I think the other thing that concerns me is what will happen with the transit study. I think that before we delve into adding so many positions and bumping so many of them up, we need to see what comes out of that study. If it indeed means more routes and more employees, more drivers, somebody can correct me, but I think for the most part, a lot of the transit drivers are full-time. Perhaps some of them are maybe part-time. I'm not sure if anybody can clarify that, but.
There's a blend.
A blend, okay, all right.
Quarter-time staff and full-time staff.
So
Three-quarter
time and full-time, just so it's in the
Three-quarter and full, so that could mean a lot. So I think that's on, we need to keep that in our minds, and because it is in the horizon that we'll find out about that. So I think that you've done a good job of blending some of the positions so far, and we can certainly keep it in mind. But I don't like the domino effect. I'm also concerned about the domino effect and that some persons might potentially lose their jobs, and that's certainly not the intent.
One of the things that Janice said is looking at all of, the staff, as a whole, the city staff as a whole. Pauline just mentioned, we have the transportation study coming. When I've talked to ASME in the past, their priorities shift, within what they're thinking are the needs of the community, or the needs of the staff. So we know that there's 42 individuals, if I recall correctly, that department heads requested for additional staff or somewhere related to that. So I think before I make a lot of statements, I would first want to see with ASME, are these still some of the thoughts for their priorities? And then have a conversation from there. I would agree that whatever the outcome of maybe that reassessment is that we consider that, and we do try to phase in something, and we'll consider what their priorities are right now. They may come and say, counselors, these are important, don't get me wrong, but we have something that's so important right now that we need to address, because this department is really hanging on by strings. They're overworked, and there's whatever the case may be, not to kind of create this fear, but that would be my request, is that we this has been a while. We know that priorities change. Give this back to ASME, ask them what are their priorities at this point. Definitely look at that, and then maybe we can consider, because what I hear personally from all the counselors is from most of the counselors, is that we may consider an additional something related to staffing, because we know that there are a lot of needs out there. And we want to phase something in. We don't want, and even Susan talked about, we need to start planning for, some more permanent staff, and maybe we can do that a little bit now, potentially, and get something in this budget season so that we can move forward and really feel good about having an initial investment in the increase in our staff.
Can I make a couple of points on that? One, first of all, you should rely on me to help you understand the staffing needs. It's certainly okay to have AFSCME weigh in. AFSCME is a union that represents some of our employees. We have two other unions. We have non-unionized staff, and you have a team of management employees that have really good perspectives on what the needs are in their operations. So I would encourage you, if you want to get a better picture of what the staffing needs are, work through our office. Let us develop, in conjunction with the management team of all the departments, what the ideal staffing levels are in every department. It's going to be well beyond the 42 positions that we considered for this budget. And we can present that to you, and then you can have the police union, the fire union, AFSCME, the general public, the non-unionized staff, whoever weigh in on that. And yes, you may get some disagreements where a union member may say, we don't need this position really, we need this position. But I'd be careful asking a union or any subgroup of employees to develop a staffing plan. That's really why you employ me and why we have the management team in place here. The other thing is, I would say, what our thought process has been through this whole property tax reform transition that we've been in is one of pace. We've had to pace ourselves, because we know if we overextended ourselves on expenses and we weren't getting the growth to make up for the tax-based loss that we're experiencing with this reform, we're going to be in a situation where you have to cut. And we've really tried hard to avoid a situation in which we have to have any conversations about cutting, because as we talked about on Saturday, when it comes down to cutting operations, most of the time you're going to be talking about cutting staff. So we've done really well, and as you can see with this budget, especially those of you that have been on the council a number of years, you haven't seen these types of staffing recommendations from us and certainly in my 8 or 9 years here. This is the first time we've been fairly aggressive with asking for new staff, but we still have a bit of nervousness about us, and we talked on Saturday about that 2024 cliff, we called it on the slide, where the multifamily could drop 5-10% down, and we might see a sharp loss in tax revenue. So we're not out of those woods yet. What I would encourage you is just, if you want the staffing plan, we'll present it, but you have to exercise some caution. Otherwise, if you move too fast, you could find yourself in a couple years having to dial back, and that's about as painful as a process as you can imagine.
And just to summarize, Jeff, for my education, there had not been staffing additions for a number of years. Is that right?
The last couple of years, we've added one or two. We've added,
Okay.
a couple of streets employees. We've added a police employee or two, but it's very, very incremental. With these 9 new positions, that far exceeds what we've done in the last few years.
So 9.25 new positions and the 5.78, I think you said, of the conversion. So a total of about 15 full-time equivalent, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay. So I think that's, to your point, Bruce, of phasing in that staff expansion, to me, that seems like a significant move in the right direction if we quantify it that way.
And I have to say that, definitely, given the history that this is, definitely doing what Council One is to increase some of the staffing. I will retract and at least, asking ASME to be the determining factor on what we do. I think my correct language should have been, give it to the city manager, and then the city manager, of course, talk to all of the individuals that have interests, such as ASME, and I know that they will weigh in with some of their priorities as well.
I guess my only additional comment to that, Bruce, was that was done. I mean, that the staff, city manager's office worked with AFSCME from that whole hourly list, as I recall, to narrow it down to like 22 positions, something like that, and decide which were the most important. We approved the 4+ that we've already done. We've got the 1 being added, and then these are some that remain from that. So that was just done a few months ago. So I don't particularly see a need to be trying to go back. My sense of what I'm hearing is that there's a majority here that is supportive of the plan as presented by the city manager in terms of the recommendations on the hourly to permanent part-time. Is that, we've been talking about this for 40 minutes, and I guess I would just be curious if we do have the majority that feel that way, that we move on.
I just want to add about ASME. I remember when first we had this, I was advocating for it. And Susan, if I remember correctly, you read a letter from ASME. They saying that you understood from that letter they are not in support of this. And you guys said, ASME even is not support of this, and we didn't even move on it until later when ASME come back and said, no, you understood our letter wrong, and we start doing this all over again, and we come to this idea. We are not saying that ASME should determine who's people supposed to work here over the city council. That's by any means is not the one that what I aiming to. But I just believe that we start the process of converting the hourly employee, to permanent employee, and we convert some of them. People are watching, looking for the converting of the rest. We said clearly last time we need to do this during the budget time. I understand that maybe all this will be a lot, and we can, I like the idea to phasing in, see which one is really important. But of course, if there is no support or something like that, but I just want to highlight that ASME is not the one that got to determine this, but we ask them to see, because I knew from them some of those positions used to be permanent, and they convert it. They make it hourly after that. I think you know that too, Pauline. There is some of the hourly employee currently used to be a permanent position, but they make it hourly. I don't know why they did it long time ago, but if we needed to have it back, and they cut down employees during that time, then this is practice being happening.
I think that's what Susan maybe touched on, that as far as the history of that and when those positions were changed. And I think, Susan, maybe you can help me clarify this too, that letter from ASME, which I saw, and I also had spoken to them. I don't think it was that they didn't approve of this. I think they just were expressing their concerns, and some of which had been mentioned, the potential loss of jobs, the potential reclassification of the positions, different requirements like language barriers and things like that. So I think that the letter was more expressing the current concerns. I do not think that it actually said that they did not approve or agree
No,
with the
like
plan. Right.
that. What it mean? Like you guys understood it. Like there's gonna be a lot of loss of job. This is maybe is not a good idea to happen. But when they come over and qualify to us, that the way that we understood it was wrong. That's what I mean. I don't mean like anything else.
So I know that
But
Susan.
we don't have to talk about this too much if somebody's not.
Yeah. I mean, I know that Susan did just make mention that as far as like what the city manager has suggested, so far we are in agreement with. I think the question really became from Maz, like, let us just really think about the levy, because the levy pays the benefits, and, you know, the full cost isn't the full cost because of the levy. And so, what are people's thoughts as of right now? Because I think, of course, I did hear that people wanted to, work on increasing staff on some level, but it has been pointed out, and I'm happy that Laura brought that out, that, again, this is 9 positions that, is kind of in that increase in the staff. Do we feel, I know we all feel good about that. Do we want to, say to Jeff, Jeff, just take our comments that you've heard today and just come back to us? Or do we want to just leave the budget as it is?
I would say leave the budget as it is. I guess I'm not, if I were sitting in Jeff's seat, I'm not sure what you would be telling him to take our comments and then come back to us.
Okay.
I really think that we just at least to approve one position, saying that will be, as Laura said earlier, maybe the people want to see like less taxes. We're still going to be reducing the tax by 3 cents, and we can, do the instead of 6 cents, and we still have maybe at least the recreation centers having full-time position approved, and leave the rest for next year budget or. Just like that, just to visit it. As if,
I'm
I
not
would
in
point out
favor.
that one of the positions that was just proposed in this budget comes off this list.
Right.
So that if we're looking at an incremental approach, we did some in the last year, we added one in this budget from that list, as well as the 9 or so new FTEs that are proposed. So I would be supportive of the budget as it stands right now.
Yeah, I'm okay again with the way it was proposed, and I think it is useful for me to think of it as, as Jeff said, the departments have asked for a lot more than they got too. So in a way, we're trying to move, the way I'm trying to view this is we're moving everything forward. No one's getting everything they want, but everyone's getting something. And that's kind of the way I've been viewing it.
I agree, and I think we are moving in the right direction, and thank you, Mazahir, for bringing this up at the last budget session and encouraging staff to look at their staffing levels and see where it could be changed or where things could be shuffled around. So, because I think that was very helpful and started the discussion, which needed to be done.
So I do hear it clear. Let's leave things as they are with this budget. But I think we are all very conscientious of, the need to have our city manager really do look at in the future, looking at the temporary to convert them over to permanent on some level, as well as some of those positions that have been requested that we weren't able to fill. So. All right, we'll move on to number 4. And number 4 is the local option sales tax. And right now, staff is recommending that we place this conversation on hold, and let's have it at a future meeting. Anyone not in agreement with that want to say something right now?
Nope, it's fine.
All right, we will put that on hold. So we will move on to capital improvement projects. And all right.
Good afternoon. Ron Kanucky, Public Works Director. I want to thank you for the opportunity to present to you the 2020 through 2024 Capital Improvements Program. I want to thank staff for their help in pulling together the pictures and graphics that you're going to see this afternoon. Kind of one of the unsung heroes is Killian Lawhead, who was the one who put together the presentation in regards to the Esri GIS aspect. She had put many hours into putting this together for us. The CIP begins in your budget book on page 47. The presentation, as we will go through it this afternoon, generally follows the budget book in the way it's presented. We'll start off with an overview by Dennis on the financial aspects, talk about some ongoing projects, go into annual projects, and then into the department-specific projects from there. There'll be about a dozen of us that'll be presenting, so there'll be some musical chairs going on as we get people up here to be able to go through their aspect of it. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dennis.
Hi there, I'm Dennis Bockenstead, the finance director for the city, and I'm going to give you just kind of a broad overview of the process we went through, and then kind of a big picture of the expenses and funding sources for the overall 5-year capital improvement program. This process began last September, and on September 3rd, we sent a standard form out to the departments to gather new projects and also to gather changes to projects that already existed in the program. Throughout the month of September, the departments completed those forms, and then on September 23rd, they turned those forms back into the finance department. We began to pull all that together to kind of pull together our working document for the CIP. There was a committee made up of department heads and other staff, and we went through those projects and the overall program, and through the month of October, we had several meetings, and from that, we produced a kind of a operating or draft CIP. And then November, we went through, in October and November, we went through the remainder of the operating budget. And then in early December, we pulled that capital improvement program in together with the operating budget and meshed all of those things together. And then just before Christmas time, we released the combined operating budget and CIP to the council and to the general public. And then today, you'll get a chance to go through that CIP. Everybody's going to get a chance to present and talk about those projects and ask questions, and kind of go from there. Just to give you an idea about the size and scope of what's in the capital improvement program. The expenditures total just over $168 million over the next 5 years. So it's a fairly sizable capital improvement program. And this chart gives you an idea of how those dollars are being programmed and spent. And as typical, the street operations is the largest portion of that. The majority of our CIP dollars go towards street projects, or at least it's the largest use of our capital dollars. The next two larger slices are transit and wastewater. And transit is primarily a result of, in the CIP, a $20 million transportation facility, which is dependent on grant funding, which inflates the size of that scope of the transit capital budget in relationship to all the other functions and departments. And then wastewater is also the result of a couple of large projects, including our reconstruction of the digester complex of approximately $8 million. Also makes that piece of the puzzle look a little bit bigger. If those projects were removed, you can see park maintenance down there in green is also a sizable piece, and that represents the implementation of your park master plan. And that is more the culmination of many smaller components from that master plan from various parks that are being improved and added to. For the funding sources, also roughly $168 million. From this, the largest piece of the funding that we use over the next 5 years is our GO bonds. And when we talk about our bond rating, that directly keys into how we fund our capital program. So we're roughly anticipating to issue about $12 million in GO bonds a year, which will be repaid from primarily property taxes and through our debt service fund. We're also looking at issuing a revenue bond for our wastewater. That would be for that digester complex, and then also the extension of the Rorich sewer, which would total about $10 million. And then the next larger pieces are state and federal grant funding. And that federal grant funding is also a little inflated because it includes about $16 million for that transportation or transit equipment facility. But both those state and federal grants primarily represent airport and street and road grant funding. But you can see that from the overall program, there's a large number of funding sources that that go into that, including about $13 million from the road use tax fund for those road improvements. This slide tells you about how much is being programmed over the next 5 years. Typically, we would see this where the taller bars or the more dollars are spent in the early years, and then it slopes downward. And this one, it's relatively flat, which means that in those out years, we already know we're planning some large capital expenditures. That 2022, that represents that transit facility of about $20 million. So that year is a little inflated because of that one project. But then when you get into those outer years, 2023 is that wastewater digester complex, and then we're looking at some major road reconstructions in 24, including Dodge Street and Park Road. But you can see that right now we're expending a fair number of dollars on capital improvements, and just from looking over the next 5 years, we're not anticipating that that activity is going to decrease over that period of time. And after that, we can hand it off for ongoing. I will let you know that on page 507 or 506 of your book, there is a table of contents for the projects that you can look up and then look up projects from that table of contents.
Okay, so moving on to ongoing projects. The first two I wish I didn't have to tell you about. I wish they were done. These were projects that were started last summer. The first one being the City Park Adventure Playground. Some of the equipment is in, but they will be continuing work into the spring, and it'll be open sometime in the spring, early summer. That has poured in place surfacing underneath it as well, so the temperatures have to be at a certain degrees before they can do that work there. The other one we talked briefly about on Saturday, actually, Willow Creek Park. Playgrounds in, shelter, restroom are nearly complete, but there is one more application of the poured-in-place playground surfacing and then site work yet to be done around it in the spring, and then it'll be open early next summer.
For the 2019 asphalt resurfacing, we have the equipment parking lot that needs to be finished up, and I think that's the major piece that's left on that project. The Idlewild drainage study, we're still working through final plans for the pump station, which will be an add alternate to that project, but generally the drainage way improvements, that the final plans there are completed. Public Works facility, as you can see from this photo, that we are occupying the building. Down there we have some final punch list items that need to be completed. Riverside Drive pedestrian tunnel. This is a project we have the plans that are finalized. At the 11th hour, Iowa Interstate Railroad has made the decision that they don't want this project to move forward. So we're trying to regroup and figure out how we can get a way to make this project happen. Obviously, it's an important project for that Riverside Drive corridor. Burlington Street and Madison intersection improvements. This project was just bid through the DOT and will be constructed this summer. McAllister Boulevard Extension Project. This, our plans and specs are on for approval at tonight's council meeting. So this will be construction this summer. Prentice Street Bridge replacement. The plans are on file with the DOT. It's out for bid currently. Will be construction this summer. And then the West Riverbank stabilization, that project is under construction. We're waiting for river levels to go down to be able to finish up the riprap placement along the retaining wall that was built. Iowa City Gateway is also punch list items. So we're in the process of working with PCI to get those items completed. And then we will have the end treatment modifications that'll be bid this summer, or hopefully built this summer, to get rid of the fences that are at the ends of the arches currently. Gilbert Street intersection improvements, punch list items. We have some footings to remove and some concrete to remove and some replacements to go on there. All right.
Okay, so moving on to annual projects, our Park Annual Improvement Fund, some of the things completed out of that this year was a number of new park signs that were put up around the community and a number of smaller projects or overruns on some of our larger projects. But that'll be similar to next year. We'll be doing a few more park signs, a few more infill, smaller projects to continue with the things from the Park Master Plan. The ADA accessibility improvements, we are working our way through those, and we're getting there. We have a few more parks coming up. We did not get any done this summer, so those will be added to next summer. You have the Park Master Plan sheet in front of you, and it shows which parks are coming up next summer. Annual rec center improvements. We have combined this so that both Robert A. Lee Rec Center and Mercer Scanlon Rec Center are now out of the same fund, and this is a certain amount of money each year. Nothing specifically large-scale planned for the next year. We have the racquetball court and restroom project happening soon at Robert A. Lee. This will be other smaller ones after that. A new one, the contracted tree planting, $100,000 a year. Excited about this. A number of sites that were identified in the tree inventory will be likely sites for these tree plantings, and that goes along with the 2 new forestry staff that are in the operating budget to help make this happen.
Annual stormwater improvements, so this will be a fund that's used for a number of things. A lot of times it has to do with repairs to storm sewer intakes, those types of improvements. You can see a picture here of a sinkhole that was developed, I believe this one might have been on Prentice Street. So a lot of times that's what happens is we'll notice an issue out there, and then this funding allows us to go out there and make those repairs kind of as needed. Annual traffic signal projects, this is a pot of money that's used for upgrading or installing new traffic signals. It's also used to replace individual components. One thing we've been doing recently is adding cameras at intersections to help with operations in those areas. Traffic calming, you can see here is a picture of a speed hump that was installed recently. That's a lot of times what comes out of this account, but it really is anything that would come out of the traffic calming program. So there could be any number of measures that would be recommended for approval, and if it's approved by the neighborhood, then could come out of this account. But again, speed humps are kind of the main one there. Curb ramps, so this is a pot of money, $100,000 a year. We typically have a project that will go out and replace or improve curb ramps in various areas. Our priorities to date have really been focused on areas that don't have curb ramps. We also will have projects where maybe they're not compliant, so they may not have the truncated domes, or they may be out of compliance. But our first priority has been to look at locations that simply do not have ramps that need them. Pavement rehabilitation, this is a program that we look at annually for asphalt overlays, PCC patching, other roadway improvements. One thing I will note here is we are nearing completion of a pavement management plan. So we had hired a consultant last year to take a look at not only our program, but also the condition of streets throughout the city. As part of that, they have been helping to inform our program on what improvements we should be looking at. A big portion of that is trying to make sure we do the right treatment at the right time. So just because a street may not be in good condition, it may not be the best candidate for certain improvements at certain times. So we've asked them to help, and like I said, we're nearing completion of that and should have a final version here in the near future, but that will definitely inform this program. The annual bridge maintenance and repair, this is used for a couple of different things. One, we look at bridge inspections out of this account, and from that, we often get recommendations, or we'll get condition assessments, but we also get recommendations for maintenance projects that would be recommended, so those will be paid for out of this We also have bridge reconstructions that we do from time to time. This can help to fund those, but it's not enough to fund bridge reconstructions alone, so it's really focused more on the maintenance piece of things. Annual sewer main replacement, this does a couple of different things. This is, I believe it's about $750,000 a year. We look at sort of spot repairs, so it would be areas where we have issues with sanitary sewer, whether it's sags or collapse or whatever it might be. It's also something that we do for our sewer lining project. So every year we go out and kind of as a preventative maintenance look at locations where sewer lining makes sense. It's a lot more cost effective and basically extends the life of the sanitary sewer. So that comes out of this account as well. Bicycle master plan, we'll have Kent Ralston come up and talk a little bit about that.
Thanks, Ron. Kent Ralston, Transportation Planner. Good afternoon. What you see before you is a line item in the larger CIP for the Bike Master Plan. For those that aren't aware, the City Council approved the first standalone Bike Master Plan back in the summer of 2017. And at your seats, it's a little hard to read there, but at your seats should be sort of a mini capital improvements program that exists within the larger capital improvements program. Lots of good projects happening in 2020. Just a few I'd like to touch on. I believe there's 7 total projects that would be completed if staff has its way in 2020. The first is the addition of bike boulevards on Governor Street between Burlington and Bowery. Bike boulevards on Prentice and Bowery, which is in conjunction with the Prentice Bridge reconstruction that the Public Works Director mentioned earlier this afternoon. A 4 to 3 lane conversion on Keokuk between Highway 6 and Sandusky, which I think will be a really important piece of the Bike Master Plan. That'll be similar to what was done on Madison Street just this last summer, where we take the existing 4 lanes, transition it to a 3-lane section, and then add bike lanes. A couple of other sort of important projects that are also in that area are the addition of bike lanes on Southgate Avenue and bike boulevards in Sandusky and Taylor. So it really creates sort of this network between Weatherby Park and the Iowa River Corridor Trail on Gilbert Street, which will be really nice. Also important projects would be the addition of bike lanes on Dodge Street from Burlington to Kirkwood. So in addition to what happened this last summer with bike lanes on Dodge Street, if we get this project completed this year, you'll be able to ride a separated bike lane all the way from essentially Prairie du Chien down to Kirkwood, which would be a nice addition for the community. And then 2 bigger projects that I think will be touched on later this afternoon are the McAllister Extension Project, which includes bike lanes as well as a 10-foot separated wide sidewalk. And then also the reconstruction of American Legion Road, which also includes bike lanes as well as a 10-foot separated sidewalk. And what you'll notice, I think, through a lot of these projects is we used to have a policy where on arterial streets we added 8-foot wide sidewalks, and through the Bike Master Plan we're now increasing those to 10 feet wide to accommodate bikes, strollers, dog walkers, and so on. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Kent, what does a bike boulevard translate to?
So that's a good question. It could be several different things, but primarily it's going to include wayfinding, signage, as well as pavement markings. We also, depending on the corridor we're examining, will look at things like removing stop signs if possible, removing parking, that sort of thing, whatever it is that can make bicycling easier in those corridors. So it takes various roles. Thank you.
Thank you.
So it's the annual senior center facility improvements, similar to the 2 rec centers, just a number of ongoing projects in this facility that we'll be looking at improving.
All right, so the next section we'll hit on would be the airport.
Good afternoon, Mike Tharp. I'm the airport operations specialist. As Dennis alluded to earlier, our projects are heavily dependent on grant funding. We get grant funds from 2 agencies, the Federal Aviation Administration and the State DOT Aviation Bureau. Between those 2 agencies, there's 3 pots of money. The FAA projects, when they participate, give us 90% of the project cost. The state, there's 2 programs, the Airport Improvement Program and then the General Aviation Vertical Infrastructure Program. Both of those contribute between 70 to 85% of the project cost, depending on the particular project. With that, the projects that we have in place here are mostly straight from our airport master plan. As I mentioned during our operations budget, the airport master plan is a 20-year document that members of the airport community, neighborhoods, city staff all kind of had a working group and developed that over about a year-and-a-half process. And then that gets blessed by the FAA as essentially the roadmap of how we see the airport developing over the next 20 years. The first project on the list is expansion of the airport parking areas. Several times during the year, if you come to the airport, parking will be very scarce. That's a sign of our usage that has grown over the years. When we host large events like the pancake breakfast, or even if we host community events like we've done the ICAT annual meetings, things where we can encourage the community come out and see the airport along with something else, parking does become an issue. This one is going to be a project that we're doing this spring. Just like all concrete, it wears out. Unfortunately, with aviation concrete, as it wears out and breaks up, it causes safety issues for aircraft to suck up bits of concrete or other things into aircraft engines, and that's a pricey repair. This one takes care of some, actually this will be our last piece of original 1950s era concrete that we are going to take out and reconstruct. The Runway 7 environmental assessment, if you looked at our airport master plan, there's a little bit of room where we can add a little bit of concrete to one end of the runway, and then both ends of our runway have a 5,000-foot landing distance. The 5,000-foot number is kind of a magic number for a lot of our charter operators and business operators that come into the airport based on the aviation insurance requirements for runway landing for their aircraft. This is the other half. That's the actual construction work. The first one was the environmental assessment study, just to make sure we're not going to displace anything. This project is the same concept, just on the other end. What we're doing is we're moving that landing point on the threshold back about 750 feet. That actually takes us up to a landing distance of about 4,900 feet, and the previous project wraps off the 5,000 number. Runway 1230 threshold displacement. This project came about as part of our obstruction mitigation work that is also underway. This is kind of the tail end of it, where we kind of shift the runway to the southeast just a little bit. That alleviates a lot of the issues we have with airspace going over the neighborhoods to the northwest and tree growth into the approach pass. Self-serve fuel expansion and kiosk replacement, we've kind of got two issues here. Both of them are actually pretty good. The main one with the fuel expansion, we are going to add a second storage tank for Jet A fuel. That's a byproduct of our activity. That will give us 24,000 gallons of storage. Part of that is usage. Part of that is also changes with the rules of delivery and supply transportation of fuels and things that the DOT has made on a national level have impacted how reliable some of those suppliers are. So the year before, several airports in southeast Iowa actually ran out of gas for a while because we couldn't get, Iowa City was not one of them, but they couldn't get fuel supplied to them appropriately, and we're trying to stave off that as well with our activity. The kiosk readers, the current readers that we have are not really able to accept credit cards with chips in them. They're just straight magnetic strip readers, and the rules with those cards are the liability is going to be transferred onto anybody operating those for cases of fraud, and we're looking to upgrade those so we can not have that issue. Airport apron expansion project. This one is just adding more parking area for aircraft. If you've seen the airport on game days or even non-game days on occasion, we do get some large aircraft that come into the area, and a couple of them, we can park them, and then they take up about a quarter of the ramp space. So it does limit what other aircraft we can handle at a given time. The FAA has a number of formulas, but they also have one based on our aircraft traffic, how big of a parking area we can have, and this meets that definition.
I have one question
Sure.
for you. I couldn't tell from the picture if where you were redoing the concrete, if it was in the middle of the runway, but what do you do if you were repairing concrete in the middle of the runway? How does that affect your operations?
For work on the runway, I mean, we'd have to close the runway for a particular period of time to do it. There are quick concrete curing methods of doing patchwork, so it doesn't delay, or it doesn't take that long to reopen a runway. The area that we're reconstructing here is actually right outside the terminal. So what's going to happen there is we phase it such a way so that we do about half the project at a given time, and then everybody else has access to that other side of the parking area.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
The Finance Department has a couple of projects underway, and this first one, the Infrastructure Asset Management, really is primarily being spearheaded by the Public Works Division, as they are the ones who will be impacted the most by it, but is a software product that really tracks, identifies maintenance from sewers, water infrastructure, storm sewers, and other infrastructure across the city, and then interfaces with the other cities' software programs to create efficiencies, help us know where to allocate and spend dollars. And the first phase of this will be hiring a consultant to evaluate the city's overall system and how it would work with our other components of that system, and then assist in writing an RFP to make sure we acquire the right piece of software that will be best suited to us. The next piece is really impact a lot of the facilities citywide, and that is looking at upgrading the city's card access system. So it'll be a more technologically advanced system, a more secure system, and we'll also be looking at upgrading systems in buildings or adding systems where they're not in place right now, and that should take place next summer.
Good afternoon, John Greer, the Fire Department. Our fire apparatus replacement program, you see on this slide here, you have something on your agenda tonight to replace a fire pump or fire engine. I'll use those terms interchangeably, not to confuse anybody. So our upcoming expenditures for an engine in 20 and 21, we have a fire safety house. That's the trailer that we take around to schools and other neighborhoods. We've been able to maintain that, and we keep kind of just moving it a little bit each year. Eventually, we're going to have to replace it, but I think we can hold off another year. And then coming up in 22, we have our Quint, which is basically an elevated waterway. It's another ladder. It's a backup to the ladder truck we have here. And then in 23, it would be the aerial. We have our apparatus typically on a 9-year frontline, 7-year reserve status. The Quint, we're just going straight, no reserve, and the ladder is the same. So, questions about apparatus? Certainly excited about this one. So, I don't know what else I could tell you other than we're looking forward to it when we can get down there.
I think I'll just remind the council that we are, what we anticipate doing with this fire station is we would open it at the same time we relocate Station 3. Station 3 is the one near Earl May, Procter & Gamble, and that's would be envisioned to move out to the east side. So we're actively looking to secure land that could house a fire station on the east side. So when you think of executing on a long-term level, it's going to be building 2 fire stations at one time and then hiring staff for one of those fire stations.
Questions?
Busy days ahead.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi again, I'm Ellsworth with the library, and we just have one pretty straightforward project in the books, replacing the carpeting and certain furnishings. These are original to the building. It's considered normal wear and tear. It's just time to be replacing them. Any questions?
Pretty easy one.
Yes.
Straightforward. Thank you.
Thank you. You all are doing self-introductions today.
Tracy Heishi with Neighborhood Development Services. We only have one item. It's the permitting software that I mentioned at our NDS budget. So it's our permitting software. We've had the same software for about 20 years, so we're excited about the new functionality we'll get with the new system. And we hope we can complete install in spring of 2020.
Awesome. Thank you.
That is it, right?
Yep.
Okay.
All right, I have a few. Julie Seidel-Johnson, Director of Parks and Recreation. Once again, I refer you to the Park Master Plan page that you have in front of you. Most of these projects follow through on the 2017 Park Master Plan. We've been making great progress through that plan, and this budget shows a lot more. First of all, though, we have City Hall. We manage government buildings, so our staff oversees the maintenance and repairs of City Hall, Senior Center, and a couple other city buildings. The projects here are things like replacing the carpet and painting up on the third floor. We've been systematically going through the building, doing different sections of that. City Hall will need a new roof in a few years, and some bathroom remodels and different things like that come out of this project. Cemetery road asphalt, just simply repairing the roads that go through the cemetery so we have access to the different sites within the facility. Intracity bike trails is smaller infill projects as needed to provide connections and when we have an opportunity to add small sections of trail. The Palisades and Stonebridge Park development, this was previously just called Future Park Development. We have two particular sites we're looking at, one more on the north side, the Palisades area, and then Stonebridge Park is what you see right there behind that bridge. That's I'm going to get this right, Lower West Branch Road. There is an old stone bridge back in those trees, and that land we've just will become parkland, and that would allow for development of that area around that stone bridge. The second one, there's a second stone bridge in Court Hill Park, and it's all from a previous railroad expansion that didn't happen, but it's kind of interesting. We have two historic bridges in our park system. Weatherby restroom, shelter, and playground replacement. We held the neighborhood meetings for this project last summer. We're underway with design development and playground selection for this. It will be bid out this spring for construction next summer. It will replace the shelter, the restrooms, and the playground area, and they will shift a little bit. The shelter will move closer to the parking lot for easier access. The playground will have a larger area and a swing area and a playground area, and then the shelter will match our master plan design shelter as we have at at Willow Creek, Creekside, Happy Hollow, some of those.
What will that mean for accessibility for the park this coming summer?
It will be under construction most of the summer. We do intend to try to keep the splash pad operating, and you'll have access to the gardens, the sport court. The splash pad will have probably portable restrooms out there, but there will probably not be a playground, and the area with the shelter and restroom would be fenced off during the project time. Chaddock Green Park, this is a few years out, but it is adding a shelter, restroom, small playground, accessible paths to the Chaddock Green Park area, which is currently our community gardens. We have a smaller fencing project, and you see the artwork that was put in last summer. We worked with Backyard Abundance on some improvements to the gardens. Those are happening during this off-season. This is a larger project to come later. Rec center improvements, these are continuing to correct items in our ADA review of Robert A. Lee Rec Center. As I mentioned, we're just about ready to go out to bid for the conversion of the racquetball game room and the on-deck restroom at the indoor pool. This would be the next phases down the road of additional restroom changes, changes to the social hall potentially, and the meeting rooms upstairs. So, Whispering Meadows on the southeast side currently is a park with basically a trail around a pond with a few benches. This would put in a small playground and a picnic shelter at that site. This is one of the areas identified in the master plan as needing more traditional play space. Lower City Park shelter and restroom replacement. You'll see this project and then one for Upper City Park. Basically, it's replacing the older structures. We will be combining or condensing the shelters so we don't have quite as many, looking at what's rented, what's used. We have a number of shelters that aren't used as much as others out there. So we'll be kind of realigning that park with the use that we're seeing, having some larger, newer facilities rather than a number of smaller ones that are getting older. Kiwanis Park playground and shelter renovation, very popular playground there, kind of a nature play area, but it is nearing the end of its useful life. So this will replace the playground. Currently the project includes the shelter replacement. We may or may not do that as we get closer, as we see the condition. It's still in pretty good shape. If not, we'll do more with the gardens and some other things that are in that area of the park. Napoleon softball fields, fields 5 through 8 is renovation, so working on the drainage, getting them laser graded, getting them renovated back to what they started with. Upper City Park, just similar to what I just talked about on Lower City Park. Hickory Hill, the Conklin Street shelter and restrooms on the north side of that park. This will be the last one of these this older shelter style that we have. We'll replace it with the new restroom and shelter as we have in our park master plan. Glendale Park is kind of a neat little park tucked back along the creek, and it currently just has the playground you see there, which is actually recycled playground equipment from a couple other parks. So this project will replace it with a new playground and add a small shelter and accessible paths to get to those two areas. This project was 3 projects in your last CIP, so we've combined them into one for bidding and construction management. Napoleon Park, it's replacing the playground that you see up there. It has a number of drainage issues where it's sitting. This is a softball complex, and our plan is to replace it with separate and smaller pieces of equipment closer to the concession area, making it kind of pods of play up along the concession area rather than having the single play space out between the ball fields. Scott Park is getting a new playground and shelter. We had the neighborhood meetings last summer for that. Scott Park has kind of a smaller playground, and it will be replaced with one that's similar in size. It will be to the south of the current playground, and the shelter will be in the same general location, just a little bit further away from the residents that neighbor that park. So in that case, the construction will happen over the summer, but we'll be able to keep the current playground and shelter open until the new ones are in place. So that's kind of an ideal situation there. And then Fair Meadows Playground, we are not touching the splash pad at that park either, or the restroom, but we are getting a new playground, and it will move to the west of the splash pad, so it'll have access off the actual parking lot for that park, which comes in from the north side. Right now we're kind of down in a low area on the very northeast corner of it, so that will change, and the shelter will move a little bit to the west and replace it with that. And that one is more of a small child playground area because of the location next to Grant Wood, which has 3 playgrounds at the elementary school. Court Hill Park shelter and replacement. This is the one that has the other stone bridge, and it's actually it's kind of hidden down there, but it's right by this playground. So this replaces this playground and the shelter right next to it. Court Hill Park currently has 3 shelters in it. We will probably look at consolidating that to maybe 1, or maybe 1 and 1 small one at the time, based on the use that we're seeing there now. Mercer Park, if you remember last year, we had a new boiler and HVAC system put in. This is the second part of that project. This is tuck pointing on the building envelope and then a dehumidification project inside to help extend the life of the systems that we've already put in, as well as the building itself. It just needs, it's at that point of 25, 30 years where it needs some TLC for the outside envelope. The next one would be the Robert A. Lee pool filter and HVAC system. You'll notice that all three of our pool systems are getting to the age where they're going to need repair and replacement down the line. That is why we have that in the operating budget we talked about on Saturday, the master planning for recreation and recreation facilities, to look at the 3 aquatic centers, to really prioritize this and other projects that are needed to keep the swimming pools operating, and to really find out what the community wants to see in the swimming pools in the future. Happy Hollow, we've done a lot of work in this park recently, are just about ready to bid the refurbishment of the basketball court. This will be the playground replacement, so just the playground at this one. Terrell Mill Skate Park, replacing the skate park, upgrading it. We've got a couple designers really interested in coming back into town. They were college students here that played on their, is that the right word? Used the skate park during their time. It will get a new design and get this replaced. Mercer Ball Diamonds, we will soon be doing some master planning along with the school district on the Mercer Park fields, including the school district uses Field 1 as their high school field at this point. But we'll have an analysis done of the other fields and to help us prioritize renovations there, things like lighting, or field number 4, we've talked about rotating it to a different, so the sunlight hits it differently and you can play differently on it. Some more to come on this, but Hunter's Run, this is replacement of the playground and shelter. You can see it's older equipment here. Once again, I think it was recycled from another park at one time. This gets it on the schedule to get it replaced. A trail section down on Highway 6, Fair Meadows to Heinz. I think anytime you go down there, you see people walking this section without a trail. It's an area that has a lot of pedestrians that needs access, so we're excited to get this section of trail built. Terry Trueblood, Woodland and Prairie Restoration. This is a project being funded by the REAP, Resource Enhancement and Protection Program, by the Iowa State DNR, $200,000 grant, so it's actually completely covered by the grant. It'll be work down in the lowlands to the west of the park, so between the river and the lake area. We had a group of university students do some master planning and analysis of that a few years ago. That'll be the basis for some of the work that's done in there. It'll be restoration of the wetlands, the woodlands, and some of the prairie areas. Reno Street Park, renovations to match with our master plan, so shelter, accessible paths in this one, and playground. Event facility improvements. Yes, it's time to start thinking about Terry Trueblood not being our newest facility anymore. We have some needs out there, things like staining the outside of the building. At both Terry Trueblood and at the Ned Ashton House, we have some HVAC and control unit things that needs to be fixed. So this gets us a project going to keep these facilities at the level that they're at now, so that we can continue to have use by the community. The other building is the H2O, or the boat rental building out at Terry Trueblood. This would give us money to continue to maintain that as well. Off-road bike trail development. We've been working with a group from the CVB and others about off-road bike racing. We think we've got some opportunities soon for some land to build an off-road cycle area. This would give us money to do that, to build this single track bike area. And then the Ped Mall playground. It seems like it's not that old, but we're having trouble getting replacement parts. It's nearing the end of its useful life, and so we're plugging it in to get it replaced in a few years. That's it for Parks and Rec.
Any questions for Julie or comments? All right.
Good afternoon, Jody Matherly, Police Chief. We just have one item on the CIPs here. It is a digital evidence management system. Our officers take in hundreds, if not thousands, of digital evidence per year at various locations, excuse me, throughout the city, and they come in all different formats. So presently, as you can see on the left side of the screen there, we have to burn that to DVD disc. It's enveloped, it's cataloged on paper, and it's physically stored. So this will allow us to move to the right side of that picture, which is simply to digitize it all, keep it digitized, and submit it into a system where we can categorize it, retrieve it with ease, and then distribute it later on to county attorneys or whoever needs it. That will cut down on $5,000 to $10,000 in man hours per year, we're estimating, and it'll also meet nicely with our climate action plan to reduce physical storage, but also to reduce waste. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Jason Hovel, City Engineer, and I'll be walking you through the Public Works section of the projects. Starting things off out at the landfill, the equipment building replacement. This is a couple of buildings that need upgrading. There's actually some equipment that won't fit inside the building, so we'll look at new building and upgrades there. Compost pad improvements. With the increase we've seen in composting, this is an area that gets a lot of work. It currently isn't in great condition, so this will go through and replace a lot of the potholes and other issues with the surface there. It'll install a hard surface for them to work off of. Southside recycling site, so this would be look at creating a new site for recycling on the south side. It would include roll-off containers, compactors, as well as electrical, lighting, signage, that kind of stuff to basically have a full-time site on the south side to help for recycling. Landfill dual extraction system, so this would be an expansion of the current system, looks at addressing landfill gas as well as leachate liquid out there at the landfill. It would be expansion of 8 or 9 wells, also include new SCADA and for monitoring of the system. The fully automated curbside collections trucks, this is for 2 vehicles. Really, it will help with the efficiency and, I guess, flexibility of the routes for solid waste. Future landfill cell design is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. As the landfill fills up, this will be the next cell that will be created. This will look for design of that cell for creation or construction in the future when it's needed. Organics grinder upsizing, so this will be replacement of the current equipment. Essentially, it will be upsizing the unit, and so with that, the current reserve is not enough to fund that, so this is basically making up the difference to purchase a new and larger piece of equipment. Lower Muscatine area storm sewer improvements, so this will be looking at a couple of different areas. The main one will be along DeForest Avenue. There'll also be some along Ginter Street. This is sort of building off of the Lower Muscatine reconstruction project from a few years ago where we had installed some of the trunk storm sewer. This will help to collect storm water from some of the side streets. Here's a picture from Sycamore Street into Forest. There's just a couple of areas where we have a lot of water trying to collect that so it spends less time on the street. Along those same lines, the North Westminster storm sewer upgrades, this is an area where we have, again, some localized flooding, so it would be look at making some storm sewer improvements in that area. The Rundell Street Pump Station vault modifications. So you can see here the existing vault and pump station. This will basically be making improvements to that. Also will make improvements to the curb ramps that are in that area, help make it more accessible and help with pedestrian access in the area and not make them quite as intrusive. River Street storm sewer improvements, the main thing here is this is an area where we actually have an open ditch, so it will help to install storm sewer in that area. It's an area where maintenance is kind of an ongoing problem, and so hopefully it will help to address that. We also will be looking to install sidewalk in the area when that project is complete. Petzel Place storm sewer improvements. This is an area where the existing storm sewer is undersized and doesn't do a very good job, especially during large events, kind of like you can see here. You see quite a bit of localized flooding, so it'll basically look at making improvements to upsize that and make it operate like it really was originally intended. Court Hill Stormwater Facility restoration. This is a stormwater detention basin on the east side of town. It's one that's become overgrown. Maintenance has become an ongoing issue with the intakes being plugged, and so it will look at basically going through, cleaning that up. There's also some overgrown trees that are impacting some of our manholes in the area. So basically just kind of cleaning it up, making it so that it's easier to maintain. In the end, it will likely be adjacent residents that will be maintaining it. So basically puts it back to a condition where they can maintain the area. Sand and salt storage bunkers. This is out at the new public works site. This is our items that were originally included with the public works site project were removed due to budget concerns. So looking at adding them at a later date. Not only would it be for sand and salt storage, but they could also be used for storing other materials such as topsoil during the non-winter months. American Legion Road reconstruction. This is one that has been mentioned earlier. So it'll include a complete reconstruction of American Legion Road from Scott Boulevard to Taft Avenue. The biggest change here is we'll be going from the existing rural section to an urban section. So instead of ditches, we'll have curb and gutter, storm sewer. There'll be some other utility work in there. In the end, we will have essentially one lane in each direction, as well as on-street bicycle facilities. We'll also have the wide sidewalk on one side as well. A couple other features for this project, we will be constructing a roundabout at American Legion Road and Scott Boulevard, as well as a pedestrian underpass that will be installed near the Hoover School. Melrose Avenue improvements. This will be a joint project with the county, so we'll be looking at reconstructing Melrose Avenue, IWV Road, from essentially Hebel Avenue to the Highway 218, the southbound ramps. This will be going back as a rural section, so similar to what it is today. It'll basically make improvements to the roadway surface and wide shoulders. As part of this project, we'll also be installing water main from where it currently ends at Slothauer Road and extend that out to the landfill. The landfill currently does not have access to city water, so that will provide access to city water to the landfill.
Jason, the last one, Rochester, American Legion, yes. Is there any plans for a bike plan? I don't know if I heard that, like
So
that bike
this
path.
will have on-street bicycle facilities. So I think we're looking at, I believe we were talking buffered bike lanes, but we'll consult the bicycle master plan, but it will be on-street facilities.
Thank you.
Dubuque Street reconstruction, so this would be the block from Washington Street to Iowa Avenue. This would be building off similar to what we had done for Washington Street. It'd be new streetscapes, sidewalk, roadway, that, as well as utility improvements. Kirkwood Avenue to Capitol Street connection. So this would be extending Kirkwood Avenue to the west and Capitol Street to the south. This would be down in the riverfront crossings area, basically extending those two to connect. It will also include a couple of water main improvements that we need to make in the area, one being on Capitol Street just north of Benton, the other being near the Benton and Clinton intersection. It will also include the removal of the railroad spur that's no longer being used, that's on Benton Street currently. First Avenue and Scott Boulevard intersection improvements. This is one we just wrapped up a study kind of looking at recommended treatment for the intersection. We will be proceeding with a roundabout in this location. Court Street reconstruction, so this will be from Muscatine Avenue to First Avenue. This will be a complete reconstruction, so it would be street, sidewalk, utilities, all of that for that section. Benton Street Rehabilitation Project, so this is one that we would be going from Mormon Trek to just east of Benton Drive. This will be one where we won't be changing the curb line. We'll basically be doing an HMA overlay of this. Along with that, we will be striping officially bike lanes. Right now, it's currently striped as a shoulder, so we will be striping enough that it can be actual bike lanes, and then we will also be doing curb ramp improvements at the intersections. Second Avenue Bridge replacement, this will be more or less a replacement of the existing structure that's in need of replacement. With this, we will also have some water main improvements kind of crossing the creek there, as well as installation of sidewalk in that same area. Rochester Avenue reconstruction from First Avenue to essentially Ralston Creek. So this will be from the bridge that was completed a few years ago and continuing to the east to First Avenue. This is one we're working on design right now. We'll be coming back to you here shortly to talk about some of the design elements. One piece of that is there are currently sections that do not have sidewalk in here. We would be looking at potentially adding sidewalk in those locations. This, again, will be a complete reconstruction, so we'd be looking at new street, sidewalk, utility improvements. With that, the bicycle master plan also includes on-street bicycle facilities, so we'd be looking at including those as well. Highway 1, Highway 6 intersection improvement study. So this will be a study to kind of look at essentially the south Highway 1, Highway 6 intersection. Be looking at potential geometry improvements and what other upgrades we might want to make to that intersection. This would be just the study and functional design, so it would be what we would use at some point in the future to look at moving forward preliminary and final design. Dodge Street reconstruction from Governor to Burlington Street. This is going to be a big one. This is one we're working on finishing up the functional design right now. So this will be, again, complete reconstruction of Dodge Street. This will be a joint project with the DOT, so there will be some cost sharing there, so that's a good thing. But again, it will be all new pavement, sidewalk, utility work as well, so a complete reconstruction of this section. Market and Jefferson two-way conversion. So this would be looking at taking each of those streets from one-way to two-way traffic. So that's going to include pavement markings, new signals, new signage. Essentially, the street width would remain the same, but we'd be looking just going from one-way to two-way traffic. Orchard Street reconstruction. So this is the section from Benton Street to the south to Highway 1. This would be looking at essentially all new street pavement. We'll also include some water main work kind of south, I guess it would be south of Douglas Street, basically between Douglas Street and Highway 1. The water main north of Douglas Street was done not too long ago, so it's fairly new. There's also a wide sidewalk on the west side that we would leave in place, but we'd be likely looking at reconstruction of the sidewalk on the east side. North Gilbert Street reconstruction, so this would be looking at the section essentially from Brown Street north to kind of where we just had finished the work for the Gateway project on Kimball. Again, this would be new street, we'd be looking at sidewalk possibly on both sides. I think that's where we would start, but we'd be looking at street sidewalk as well as utility improvements. Gilbert Street Bridge replacement. This is, like it says, would be replacement of the Gilbert Street Bridge over Ralston Creek. It would include not only the bridge, but we'd also be looking at improvements for sidewalk, storm sewer, as well as the bank slope protection and associated work. We received some DOT funding for this, so we'd be looking at this one probably starting construction here shortly with construction in '21. Gilbert Court sidewalk infill project, this is one where we get requests pretty frequently. So this would be essentially installing sidewalk where there's kind of gaps in sidewalk right now on Gilbert Court. And it would be in the area north of Highland Avenue. And again, it would be on both east and west sides to basically complete the sidewalk system in that area. Park Road reconstruction, this would be the section from the bend at Rocky Shore to Riverside Drive, which is essentially where the Gateway project had ended. This, again, would be complete reconstruction, new street, sidewalk, and utilities, and other associated work. Taft Avenue reconstruction, this would be just for the section from American Legion Road to Lower West Branch. You can see in 2023, there's $1 million. That would be essentially for the design of the project. So this would be just design money with construction anticipated in a further out year. And again, this would be reconstruction from the current rural section to an urban section with curb and gutter and all of that. Moving down to the wastewater treatment plant, the clarifier repairs. So this would be repairs of 2 of the clarifiers. We completed repairs on a couple of them not too long ago. It'd be similar to that. These are original components that have just reached the end of their useful life and need to be repaired. Scott Boulevard trunk sewer. So this would be extension of the trunk sewer from just north of the Iowa Interstate Railroad, kind of east of Scott Boulevard. It would be extending it up to American Legion Road. We have a lift station out there existing. It would tie into that area. It would allow us to get rid of that lift station, so then we can go gravity that entire section. So that will be a plus there. And with that, we'd be looking at timing, trying to coordinate that with essentially the American Legion Road project, to kind of same area, so hopefully coordinate those to work together. Nevada Avenue sanitary sewer replacement. This one is pretty much a strict replacement, so it's existing sanitary sewer that's not in great shape, have some sags and other need for replacement, so essentially replacing it in the same location. Dennis had mentioned this one earlier. This is one of the big ones out at the wastewater treatment plant, the digester complex rehabilitation. So this will have a couple of different things that it's going to do. One is going to be more on the process side of things, looking at removing phosphorus before the digestion phase. And that's somewhat linked to the second phase of that, is that struvite. We've mentioned that in past years. It's kind of a hard mineral-like deposits that occur throughout the system. So looking to kind of change things up, hopefully reduce that. And then the second phase would be to make improvements and kind of address some of the existing deposits that are there and get those cleaned out to help make the system work better like it was originally intended. The influent rake and screen replacement. So again, this is just looking at replacing original equipment that is at the end of its useful life. This is one that has been becoming more of a maintenance issue. So it would be essentially just replacing the existing equipment. The Hawkeye lift station rehabilitation. So this will be essentially making improvements to the lift station that's there just kind of west of Mormon Trek Boulevard. So this will be essentially making improvements to this. It will allow for capacity improvements. We'll be able to demo the existing building, allow for future capacity improvements, but there won't be any additional pumps at this time. It would just be set up for future use if needed. The Raritt South Sewer, so this would be extending sanitary sewer along Abbey Lane, so over near Mormon Trek. This would extend sanitary sewer under Highway 218 and allow for future development on the west side of Highway 218, especially in the Carson Farm area. This will include a couple of different things. One would be essentially upsizing of some existing sanitary sewer that's out there, and then extending new sanitary sewer the rest of the way under Highway 218.
Jason, if I can jump in here and give you a break to take a drink of water or something. This is an important project for council to think about because you're opening up a very large area of development with this project. Currently, it's just not really feasible for a developer to build south of Railroad Road there because the cost of getting that sewer through 218 is quite high, as you can see. Before we get to 22, 23, what we need to do as on the planning end and with Tracy's department is update the comprehensive plan over there and really figure out what we want that neighborhood to be, what types of public facilities we need in that area. I mentioned Saturday, do we want to consider rec center? We need to talk to the school about any school sites that they may want. So there's a lot of planning that needs to take place. And then, obviously what you're doing with the South District form-based code, we hope that what comes of that would be able to be applied to this area too. So there's still quite a number of variables, and that's why you see this project out a few years, but understand that your staff is going to be working pretty hard over the next few years to get us to the point where once the sewer's in, you all and the public feel very comfortable with what's going to come after that.
Do you know the ballpark number of acres that this opens up for development?
I don't. Do you?
Okay. That's okay.
I recall the acreage for the Carson Farm is about 200 acres, but it'll serve more than that in the drainage area.
Okay. Thank you.
Jeff, did you mention on Saturdays, was this the area where there's potential for an additional park once this is?
Correct, yes. I think we would look at a potential park site here. Current plans show a large stormwater, regional stormwater detention basin in here, so you could think of a park that incorporates that. Part of the planning process we need to go through is analyzing whether that regional stormwater basin is still the best path forward, or if there's some other stormwater management techniques. But yes, I could see, I wouldn't be surprised if the school district wanted a site out here, and it could be an opportunity for us to look at a Mercer Park Southeast type of collaboration.
And will the county be consulted at all? Because this looks like it's abutting the county as well.
Yeah, so this would be an area that we would have to annex in to the community.
Continuing down at the wastewater plant, the dewatering roll-off paving, so this will be an area where we'd essentially have a paved area for them to work for their dewatering containers. So this is basically looking at for sand and car wash and septic haulers. They basically use these for dewatering those loads and then for disposal. The wastewater plant mixer improvements, these would be essentially for new mixers, help with making the process more efficient. Biosolids conveyor improvements, again, just improvements to the existing system, help it operate better and make it more efficient with their operations. Down at the wastewater plant, we have an existing cold storage building, so this project would look at providing some heat to that facility with the goal of keeping it above freezing. Similar to that, this would be, the new cold storage building would be construction of a new facility, similar in size to the cold storage building that's down there now. The difference here is it would be mostly just covered, so that the sides would be open, but it would be a covered facility. Again, kind of that 90 by 40 range as far as size. Fifth Ward sanitary reroute, so this would be an area down off of Dodge Street. This is a section that currently kind of cuts diagonal through the neighborhood. It goes under a few different structures. There's been some issues in the past with some sinkholes under structures, so this would look at realigning that sewer to be more within the right-of-way and to get it out from underneath those structures. Benton Street trunk sewer improvements, similar to the Fifth Ward. This would be another one where we'd be moving the sanitary sewer into the green space, making it easier to maintain in the future, as well as upsizing some of the main near Emerald Street. number of water main replacement projects in here. The Spruce Street is the first one of those. This would be a section where we're replacing existing water main, and as is our policy, upsizing from 6-inch to 8-inch, which is our new minimum. Bradford Drive water main replacement is along those same lines, again going from the 6-inch to 8-inch. Water distribution pressure zone improvements. This will look at making some strategic improvements in the water system at a few different locations. The main goal here is to really look at helping kind of that northeast section of the city, going from one pressure zone to multiple pressure zones. The northeast portion is an area where we've had some impacts or some issues with proposed development and being able to provide sufficient pressure for that development. This will help to alleviate that. Jordan well rehabilitation. So this will look at removing and reinstalling the Jordan well located up at the water treatment plant area. Forest Avenue water main replacement. Again, this is another replacement project of existing water main going again from the 6-inch to the 8-inch. Collector wells 3 and 4, the rehabilitation of those wells, again, up at the water treatment plant. This would be looking at addressing some of the laterals for those wells, as well as rebuilding of the pumps within those wells. Highway 1 water main replacement, so this would be replacement of existing water main from kind of Hawks Ridge area over to the Walmart entrance. This would be 12-inch water main. We'd be looking at, again, replacement of what's existing. The issue here really has to do with corrosive soils, and so it's basically deteriorating at a rapid rate. So we're, unfortunately, it's not that old, but it's in need of repair. High service pump VFD replacement. So this would be the variable frequency drives of our high service pumps, basically replacing those drives. Peninsula well field power redundancy. So this would be extending the Mid-American electrical service down Foster Road to the Peninsula area. This would be updating or upgrading the switchgear, and really this will help with redundancy and resiliency for the electrical feed in that area. Chlorine feeder system upgrade, again, out at the water treatment plant. So this would be upgrading of the system to help with their operations. Out at the water plant, looking at upgrading their audiovisual systems for the meeting room. That's an area that's typically used for training. It's a nice size to get larger groups in there, so not only meetings, but again, trainings for staff as well as outside groups. So it'd be just kind of upgrading the audiovisual components there. At our GSR, or our ground storage reservoirs for the water system, looking at replacing the generator enclosures at 3 of those sites, so Rochester, Sycamore, Emerald GSRs. The chemical room and outdoor lighting upgrades, again, at the water plant, this would be looking at upgrading to LED fixtures. The water main replacement of Highway 6, so this would be Fair Meadows to Industrial Park Road. Again, replacement of existing water main. It would be going. This would actually be 16-inch water main that would be replaced. And that is it for Public Works. Finally, questions?
I just have a quick question. In past years, you've talked about the aging of a lot of our sewer system in the city. Where do we stand with that, or is that like a never-ending process? You've listed a number of sewer main replacements. Are we catching up, or just constant process?
I mean, it's going to be a constant process. I mean, with anything, you have lifespan of these. So anything that we install, today is going to be aging as we move forward. So it will be an ongoing process. I think we do a pretty good job, especially on the wastewater side of things, of preventative maintenance and with televising and cleaning and making sure that we are maintaining those, but also we observe issues that come up sooner. On the water side of things, and unfortunately, I think a lot of times it's main breaks is how we learn about areas that are in need of repair. We do have, on the water main side of things, we have a pretty good idea of certain vintage, I think, water main that has tended to be issues, so we kind of keep an eye on those areas maybe a little bit more than others. But certainly it's going to be an ongoing process.
And that's part of the importance of the asset management system. We have some of those pieces in place now, but as we develop that and can track those work orders that go along with repairs on those systems, it'll take better indicators on where we need to focus those improvements.
As you look at some of the buildings and storage buildings that you're replacing, do you look at all at adding solar to them?
We will as we move forward. As we've done our new building down at Streets, that will have a solar component that will be built with that. We're also doing a solar component at the Terry Trueblood Lodge also. So as we move forward, we'll be looking at solar on those facilities.
Thank you.
Thank you both. All right. It's transportation.
Good afternoon. I'm Darian Nagel-Gam, Transportation Services Director. We have about 13 proposed projects, and the first one of which is parking facility restoration and repair. And as you could see up there, this is an example of just some of the wear and tear that happens with our parking decks due to the vibration, the salt, the sand, just wear and tear. And we are in the first year of a 5-year plan to upgrade and maintain our facilities. We've had a consultant come in over the last year and help do a complete inventory of our facilities so we know what repairs are necessary and what proactive measures we can take to help lengthen the lifespan of our parking facilities. So that is the first project. The second project is replacement of electronics in our smart parking meters. When we moved to a credit card-based connected parking meter, we knew that the lifespan would be about 10 years of the internal equipment, of the brains, the computer pieces, and we're approaching that end of that lifespan, so we're looking to upgrade that to the next generation within the next year. The third project is video cameras for parking facilities, and this is safety and security cameras, which would better enable us to respond to incidents and just make sure that patrons using our facilities have some measure of security 24 hours a day. Parking enforcement vehicles, this would be the purchase of a new vehicle with license plate reader technology to help expand our enforcement efforts, our parking enforcement efforts, and also the purchase of and replacement of a license plate reader for our existing vehicle that we do have today that is scheduled for replacement in 2020. The next project is parking ramp automated parking equipment, and this is another investment we made about 10 years ago that we knew at some point would come due, and as in with many electronics, you get about 10 years of life out of them, and then it's time to look for replacements. And so we are looking to begin replacing our automated parking equipment in our facilities. We've had, I would say, a decline in performance over the last few years, which involves a big, or an increasing, I should say, investment in staff time to help get people out of the facilities quickly and easily. So this is an investment back into that system. As part of our climate action plan, we've been really focusing on how we can better support more sustainable modes of transportation, and of course electric vehicles are one of those initiatives. So we are hoping to, and this project is to expand the number of our parking facility spaces where we have electric vehicle charging stations available. The seventh project is replacement of LED fixtures in our parking facilities. We, of course, those of you who've been here for a while, remind back about 10 years, we were able to find some significant cost savings in upgrading our LED fixtures in our parking ramps. I think so much so that we got a call from Mid-America, and they just want to make sure everything was okay because they didn't see as much usage. And indeed, it was from a lot less, energy demand. So that said, they don't last forever. They're reaching the end of their useful life, and so we're hoping to begin that replacement process and utilize some of the lights that are still in working order to help those that might not be in working order in other facilities. The eighth proposed project is Tower Place drainage modifications, and this is due to the increase in extreme rainfall events and the inability for the Tower Place parking ramps drainage infrastructure to be able to keep up. We've had some situations where we've had cars in the lower level they've been flooded just because the infrastructure has not been able to get the water out of the facility fast enough during extreme rainfall events. So this project would be geared towards making some adjustments to the stormwater infrastructure so those sort of incidents don't happen. It would basically be to make the facility more resilient. The ninth project is the transit maintenance facility relocation, and we mentioned this again at the Saturday meeting as well, but our current transit facility is reaching the end of its useful life. I think we're on our 36th year. The federal government, the FTA, indicates that usually 40 years is about it for a transit facility. Other complications are that we can't expand at our facility. So with our growing population, if we're trying to expand our services, we're kind of hemmed in. And we're also utilizing equipment in the facility that was built into the facility in the early 80s that is reaching the end of its useful life, and it's getting increasingly difficult to find replacement parts for it. So this is the project that would enable us to build a new transit facility on the Public Works campus. And of course, we're actively seeking federal funding for this facility. The next project is a transit bus shelter replacement and expansion, and this is simply going out to across the community really and taking down those old transit shelters that maybe are in state of disrepair, and this is a prime example of one that we're systematically removing, but we're also seeking to add shelters and add more comfortable amenities at our transit stops across the community.
Is this like the shelter will be added before or after the study, or when exactly?
Yep, great question. So we have added 9 shelters in the last year. We have 7 or 8 more coming this year. And then we're going to wait until we get through the transit study just to make sure that we're not putting shelters in locations that may be moving around. But we do intend to keep moving with this process, and we also expect to get recommendations from the consultant team about what sort of amenities we should really provide at our transit facility. So we're looking forward to getting that information and then continuing with the program from that point.
And more of these are all with solar on them.
Yes, that's a great point. Yes, so they all have solar lighting, which is fantastic. If you drive by them at night, it's really helpful from the driver perspective. They really love that they can see people waiting in there because there's nothing, you don't want to miss passengers ever. Especially during cold winter nights like we've been having. So, so they will all be solar powered.
Awesome.
The next project is bus wash repair, and I would chalk this project up to one we hope we don't have to do. This is an example of the built-in equipment at our transit facility. This is what a 36-year-old bus wash looks like. If you haven't seen one before, kind of looks like a retro antique car wash, but it's aging, it's reaching the end of its useful life, and with every repair we have, we're getting the indication that at some point there's not going to be a way that we can fix it. So this is this is in case, but we're really hoping that we're able to acquire some federal funding for a new transit facility before anything happens. And the last project is transit interchange and bus stop improvements. And just as I was mentioning, out of the transit study, we're expecting there to be some recommendations about how we can improve our transit interchange, make it more user-friendly, make it more comfortable for our transit users, and also in stops throughout the community, so not just the transit interchange. So this is to help us maybe get a quick start on some of those transit recommendations we expect to get this summer.
I have a question about parking meters, which is, as you do the parking meter, the smart parking meter replacement, would those meters also be capable of having the rates changed at certain peak hours if it turns out there's a desire to do that?
That's a great question, and that's certainly, the technology exists and is out there today, so that's certainly something that we could evaluate. I mean, I think a lot of communities are looking at demand-based parking pricing at different times of day. I mean, the university does it at their ramp facilities. So I think the technology exists, and that's certainly something that we could look into.
Thank you so much. All right.
All right, we're into the home stretch. So these are projects on the radar section that are either in your unfunded or may not even show up in the budget book. But these are projects that we feel you need to be aware of because sooner or later they may become a priority for us. So the first project is Burlington Street Bridge replacement. You may or may not be aware of there's two bridges that cross the Iowa River at Burlington Street. The eastbound bridge is the City of Iowa Cities, and the westbound bridge is the DOT's. So it's unique that the city would own a facility on a state route, but in this case, due to the age of that bridge, the DOT has generously left us in charge of that one. So we had the state had a grant program that they had applied for some bridge funding. We had looked at that program. It actually was a federal funding program. We had looked at that program for a combined project at this location. It was not eligible, but we still have interest with the DOT to look at combining these two bridges into one structure. And then with our help, of course, they would then take over the maintenance of that bridge in the future.
Okay, so we've talked bridges, sewers, all this great fun. I mean, it's stuff we all need, but let's go back to the fun stuff for a minute. The community engagement spaces. A couple of plans that we have out there that haven't been funded. One is Lower City Park Master Plan. This was done in 2016. We do have a number of other projects happening in City Park, as you know, and those all support the concepts of this plan. But the overall plan to raise the roadway and provide some additional flooding protection has not been funded. The price tag was about 24. Am I right on that? 24 million? Yeah, 24 million, although some of that would be taken off with these other smaller projects that we've been doing with the shelters, the ball fields, the playground area. So that's out there. The next one is the aquatic facilities. We talked about this a little bit on Saturday with the recreation programming and facilities master plan to look at all three of the aquatic facilities to determine the best path forward. Do we need three? Do we need different types? What are the needs and the uses desired by our community, and how does that reflected in the long-term maintenance and care of these facilities?
Future public works facility improvements, as Darian had mentioned, on our master plan, we have space for the transit facility. Along with that, it would be a joint maintenance facility that would go with that. So equipment and transit would have a maintenance facility. As some of you are aware, we are in the process of potentially acquiring some additional land on the corner. Come and Go has made the decision that they are not going to pursue a facility there, so we're in the process of looking at that. But it opens up some more space for us at that site. Iowa Avenue pedestrian bridge. So this project, in 2003, we did a experimental project here where we did a chloride extraction of the bridge deck, which worked fairly well for about the first 10 years, but it's in the process of deteriorating right now. And so we're working with a bridge consultant to do determination of what we need to do from a repair program on this, whether it's a total reconstruction. This Bridge is a joint facility, the DOT and the University of Iowa and the City of Iowa City. It's 50% DOT owned, 25% university owned, and 25% city owned. So it would be a joint project as we move forward on that.
East Side Sports is another master plan that was completed about 4 years ago on the east side by the new Hoover Elementary School. The site is out there. We've had the master plan in place. We had a group, or we have a group of baseball and sports parents in the school district and others, the Convention and Visitor Bureau, still interested in this project. So we've been doing some updating work on the master plan, but it is still one that's out there to be funded.
All right, well, thanks to all of the staff for walking us through the capital improvement projects, which there are many that we have to really consider for our community. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Any other comments for anyone out there?
I just had a procedural question, Jeff, talking about all of the parks projects and some of them that have been continued from last year. What happens with the contractor that it's delayed, the finish time is delayed? Is there like a fee, a fine, and then where do those funds go to then?
Yeah, we do have in the contract, we have liquidated damages if they don't meet certain conditions. It's a little more complicated than just a simple date because there's allowances for weather and unknown conditions or delays from our design team or whatnot. So it's not always a clear-cut number of days, but the contractors are definitely aware of that in both of the projects that we have that are delayed. Now, I don't know where the funding would go if we...
So with our construction projects, you know, there is a liquidated damages clause that's in those. The cost to a contractor, you know, a per day cost, or depending on how it works out, that's done as a change order on that contract, and so it just reduces the overall final cost of the project. They don't write us a check out for those damages. It goes as a change order against the project, and it reduces the final cost of the project.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you all again. All right. So we should probably transition to clarification of agenda items for today in the formal meeting. And just for the knowledge of the new counselors, typically we will focus in on some of the consent items and discuss some of the other items that we'll be voting on or talking about. We'll, of course, at the time of the meeting, discuss those. So clarification of agenda items at this time. So one thing I did want to mention is Angie Jordan's report from the South District. It takes a village meeting, is what it was called, and it was a data collection. The good thing, I did attend one of the meetings, and the way that this meeting derived was because there were business owners that reached out to the South District to kind of talk about some of the negative choices that was happening within their establishments. And rather than calling the police, the businesses wanted to gather people together just to talk about the behaviors and to just collect some data and try to figure out what are ways that we can, as a community, kind of change these behaviors. And so it's really the data collection. There's going to be more meetings to follow. So I would encourage counselors. I do know that there is a meeting. The South District meets once monthly. There is a meeting tomorrow. I would encourage counselors, if they're able to, maybe tap into some of those meetings or at least read some of the emails that we get from the South District after their meetings, read some of their meeting minutes.
7A.
Go ahead.
7A for the, yes, I know that the staff respond for Richard's table for Langenberg Avenue, but at this point, is this like we have to respond or also?
No.
When I read the letter, I don't know what we should do about this.
Yeah, Dr. Stapleton reached out to staff directly too, so we corresponded outside of this. So he has been responded to, and actually I think I don't know if Kent's not here anymore, but the transportation planners are looking at a particular site distance issue that he has with the stop sign out there. And I think I've given you some background overall on Langdenberg. I mean, there's a long, long history of some traffic concerns there. We really feel like we've done about everything we can from a calming standpoint, given what's built out there. But we do remain in communication with him and some other neighbors out there.
I did just want to make state for the record that I was referring to item 7B, the Angie Jordan It Takes a Village report.
And I was also going to refer to that and thank Angie for including that in our packet. Some very helpful information in there, and I think it's meaningful because it came from the folks that attended the meeting and their ideas and their suggestions. And I think there were many items in there that we as a council can encourage and support and keep in mind as we go along and make decisions about things. Particularly, there was comment about making their voices matter and inclusiveness, and I think we always have that in mind. But there was also a lot of reference to the school district, and I see Charlie out there in the audience, and I'm encouraged by him being on the school district board, and confident that he will speak up about the issues that were raised in this report and that relate to the school district. So thank you, Charlie, ahead of time.
If nothing else for the formal agenda, then we'll switch over to info packet, December 19th. Kelly, do we need to figure out KXIC radio show?
No, I'll do another memo here when it gets towards the end of the month.
Okay, awesome. If there's nothing for December 19th, we'll switch over to January 2nd, info packet. The one thing that we do have to do, you'll see list, we need to talk about pending work sessions. As is typical that once we transition and have a new council, essentially that we review some of the pending items just to make sure that this is what we want to move forward with as a new council.
Yeah, and then just a little bit more information. Typically, what happens at the beginning of a year, particularly after an election, is this pending list will grow really quickly once you start having some strategic planning decisions, because that's where kind of the blue sky thinking comes up, big pictures, a lot of requests for additional staff information. So we like to take this time to say, what remaining on this list is really important to you? Let's keep that on. And then what are some things that may not be the highest priority for use of your time? And just looking out, you've committed your next work session to meeting with HCDC, assuming that they're available. And then you can see that we have a couple of conference board meetings coming up. So you're already into February in terms of rationing your already scheduled time for work sessions.
So I wonder if it would be helpful for us just to go through the list real quick and just get some feedback from counselors. So number one, evaluate need for loss. We've already talked about that. So we know we're going to keep that. And then number two, consider a plan for rubberized surfacing at playgrounds and development strategies to address equity gaps noted in the Parks Master Plan and plan for the equitable distribution of destination parks within an easy and safe distance of all residents.
Yeah, that's one that that I raised, and I think the rubberized surfacing seems to have made progress from what I understand through the Parks Commission, but I still do have, and in fact, may be preparing a memo to staff to try to identify some issues that I see as we move forward, which would include this question of equitable distribution of our parks in certain parts of the city as identified by the Parks Master Plan. So I'm still interested in talking about that and seeing with the current council what what everyone's thoughts are with respect to how we might accomplish that.
I guess my question, has the Parks and Rec Commission talked about these things specifically? And it would seem to me that would be the place to start, and then for them to come to us with a recommendation.
Yes, they've discussed it, and Julie's prepared to
Okay.
share with you what they
Okay.
talked
Okay.
about.
Then, yeah, I think we ought to hear what they've had to say, so.
So it sounds like we'll keep that on because there's already been some preparation if people are okay with that. We'll move down to number 3, review of staff's growth boundary analysis, Johnson County Fringe Area Agreement update.
That's one that we'll have to do with you.
Okay, so we're going to keep that. And then number 4, discuss amending city code to require staff or zone applicants of large-scale developments to consider the effects of the proposed projects on future carbon emissions and absorption capacity, and to take actions that will help achieve the city's carbon emission reduction goals. So that's really related to our climate action emergency. Now, I'm not sure if some of this is all a part of the 100-day report.
Bits and pieces of it. So we identified some policies we want to take a look at in that 100-day report. But I think when this was mentioned by council, you could think of how we've used our racial equity toolkit and basically applying a climate equity lens to all development proposals that come forward. I think as staff, we understand the desire. We know what your values and visions are when it comes to climate action. We're going to do our best to work within that framework as we review things. We'll suggest policy revisions. We're a little hesitant to develop yet another kind of component to a staff report that would come along with every rezoning and every plat that comes before you. So I guess in short, what I'm saying is I think this slowly happens over time as we implement that report. But if you want something more immediate, you probably need to talk about it and let us know exactly it is, what your expectations would be.
I guess me personally, I know that we have the climate action commissioners, and a part of what their task has been is to look at all aspects of what the city does, including large-scale developers, and make some recommendations as to how we can reach our climate action goals. And so personally, I do believe that this is being met with that Climate Action Commission, but of course, here is very specific to look at large-scale development, and I do believe that it's on their radar, in a huge part of their radar, but that's just me as one commissioner, or one voice here, and that's my sense, is that it would be on their radar for certain.
Well, I think with what you're saying, Bruce, makes sense. If anything, maybe to send a message to them and say, we're taking this off from our pending work list because these are things we want you to take a first look at in your role as a Climate Action Commission. So
that sounds like a good approach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, conceptually, I am interested in the idea, as Jeff, in a sense, suggested, that a kind of a way of assessing projects with respect to their carbon footprint. And, maybe there is a threshold, that we consider in terms of when that kind of assessment would take place. But having some formal way of getting a better idea of what the impacts of a project could conceivably be, I think, especially in our transition phase here, and in the sense that I don't know if we all have a sense of second nature as to what the potential impacts would be. So, yeah, I like the idea. Perhaps the best way of going through it would be through the commission.
I think so.
Okay. Seemed like there's a consensus to go that route. Any thoughts from staff?
I was just going to mention that they do have a working group that is dedicated to assessment of building efficiency, and that could expand into this idea of development. At their meeting yesterday, they were very attuned to these cross benefits and cross-cutting issues that pertain to climate action. How does development relate to transportation issues, to equity issues, and those kinds of things. So they're still working on developing what that assessment of those issues and initiatives are, how to approach that, but this could be a good topic for them.
All right, number 5, discuss alcohol usage policies in city parks. And that was one that I put up there. And I think one of the thoughts that I had for putting that on the list is really related to public space. And when you think about where alcohol is outside of people's homes in the public, it is typically in an establishment where you have to purchase a drink. And so my thought was in the parks would probably be the most appropriate place where individuals within our community could bring their, while they're having graduations, even retirement parties or whatever the case may be. It is a public space where, it's low cost for them to rent or reserve, sometimes is even free, for them to have the opportunity to have adult beverages in the park. Of course, the public spaces such as the rec centers and that type stuff isn't appropriate or not what I'm recommending at this time, but I would think that maybe we can have further discussions just about having it at some of the city parks, and wondered if there was any support to continue to have this on the list just to talk about it.
I'm just curious where we ended up on that, because I thought we had made some
if I
allowances
recall
for it.
correctly, we, shortly before the special election, Bruce, but we brought this up, and I think it may have received support on the first 2 readings, and then on the third one, or the second one, council maybe deferred indefinitely or actually voted it down. I can't recall, but there was some concerns and some desire for the city to consult with the Partnership for Alcohol Safety. So we did that between readings, and predictably, the Partnership for Alcohol Safety has concerns for expanding usage of alcohol in parks or public spaces. And I think the council just kind of decided at that point to let the issue go. But we did a whole comparison. It went through the Parks Commission. We provided some comp cities and what cities allow it, what they don't. We had rules on glassware and kegs and hard alcohol. All that stuff was kind of all spelled out at that time.
Essentially, it was a staff proposal to allow use in the shelters, as I recall.
Mm-hmm. That sounds right. I'm willing to discuss it again. I don't know about others.
Yeah, I'm okay with discussing it.
Okay, so we'll keep that on the list. Number 6, discuss possible challenges to residential zoning classifications to allow and to require a greater diversity of housing types. The missing middle. I see nods, so I would probably say we'll keep that on. Number 7, determine topics for February 11th joint meeting with UISG. And that's going to be coming up, so maybe we should put that on our work session for next meeting. Okay. Number 8, City Conference Board meeting, February 18th.
That's going to happen, yeah.
Yeah. So initiate the 2019-20 strategic planning process, and that's also going to happen. So it does sound like the only one that we are going to remove for now is going to be number 4, and we're asking that this language be transferred over to the Climate Action Commissioners.
Okay.
All right.
That sounds good. I think I want to make sure that we're on the same page. The sooner we can get to strategic planning, the better. I wanted to make sure that you all felt comfortable with the budget process, and I think after you get through your next meeting, you'll have the discussion with HCDC. You'll have some time to think about the information you took in today, identify any other issues. But assuming we can put the budget to rest in late January, early February, we should really have a discussion probably at your February 4th meeting about how you want to conduct your strategic planning process. Is that a special meeting off-site? Is that use of your regular work session times? Would you like a facilitator to assist with that? We should really get those plans in place here pretty soon.
And I do want to just point out what we discussed as IP4 and IP5 from the January 2nd packet. And I also want to just make a point just as far as like timing for our budget so that it is very clear to councilors what that timeline looks like. So for the max tax rate, it needs to be set by January 28th in order to make the February 4th agenda. After that time, we can still make budget changes, but we cannot raise the tax rate. So that's very important to know. And then all decisions should be made no later than February 18th council meeting. That gives staff the time to prepare the state documents so we can set the public hearing on March 6th and then gain final approval on March 17th. From the January 2nd info packet, there's two other things that we did want to talk about, which one, IP7, that is the joint request meeting for HCDC, which we've already talked about, and we'll be having a joint meeting. And then IP6 is the joint entities agenda for the January 13th that's going to be coming up. And so we should probably discuss some topics. I kind of sort of recall that we mentioned having affordable housing presentation request, or just to get their feel. That's what I recall. I don't know if anybody in past council meetings as a topic that we would bring up.
I think it was the Mobile Home Task Force report.
Okay.
Is what council most recently indicated.
Okay.
That it would be good for that commission, or for that
There is
group.
something else.
Yeah.
I just don't remember on top of my head, but I remember we talked about, I guess, some South District.
The South District form-based code was brought up.
The
Yes,
form-based
thank you.
code, and we would like to talk about it to the school district at least, because it might be, when we expand this area, will be more density, and it might be like needed of another school there. We just have to tell them that what we are doing.
I think in the school district, Superintendent Murley has reached out to me and indicated a desire to talk about the form-based code. What I've communicated to him is that it's probably a little premature now. I think we want to get the draft regulating plan out there, which is a visual that will help everybody understand and conceptualize exactly what we're talking about. I did share with him the presentation that NDS staff gave the council maybe November, December, just kind of the general update on where we stand. But once we get that regulating plan, I think you'll start to see the layouts of neighborhoods, and you'll have just a much better understanding. The council will, the school district officials will. So my personal opinion is it's probably a little premature for January 13th. But if you want to do it, we can give much the same presentation that you all received in December. I'm just not sure how beneficial that is to that group.
I'd say wait.
Any other suggestions for that joint entities agenda that, as a council, we might want to present? Okay. And that's a quarterly meeting, is that not?
Yes.
Okay, all right. At some point, we may just want to highlight some of our climate action as a city, but we can possibly wait until we actually get that back from the commissioners. Anything else from I2 info packet?
No. I guess I still think that, even though, Jeff, I understand that you're saying this is premature to add it to agenda, but I think just giving them, because sometimes you cannot just we wait until we're ready to implement something, and maybe the school need to do something else in there. But just if we can give them highlight about overall, the same thing that you presented to us. We don't want to and we can tell them this is premature right now, but that's the thing that we're heading toward that directions. especially if the superintendent reach out to you.
Yeah, so again, I've given him a copy of the video from that report, and I presume he shared it with folks that have, that he feels need to have that information at the school district. I think, and then I should also say that staff met with the leadership team, Superintendent Murley and his leadership team met to discuss the plan in general, and just city growth in general. If we want to meet sooner, I would suggest that maybe we get a group of staff, and if you want to have a council liaison or two join, it might be better just to be city school district as opposed to bringing in Coralville, North Liberty, Tiffin, Solon, a lot of those smaller towns that may not be impacted as much by what we're doing with our zoning code. I think if we want to share that when it's near completion with that group, they may be able to learn and take some things away, but to share it with that larger group, I'm just not sure there's going to be a whole lot for those other entities to take away. So if the council would like us to follow back up with Superintendent Murley and offer something sooner, we can do that, and you can decide if you want to schedule, a joint meeting with them now or a month or two down the road, or if you just want staff to continue to work with them on that.
I guess you'll see. I don't care, but I just wanna want them to know the information. It doesn't matter if now or whatever you see is good. Just
I'll follow up with Superintendent Murley regardless, and just let him know that I'll let him know my thoughts, that it's still probably a little premature, but if there's an urgency on his end that I'm not appreciating, that we'll make arrangements to get some group of us together to talk.
I think that would be a good idea. We've had joint meetings with them before, and I think, particularly the one when they were talking about the bond, the big bond, we met with them, and I think it turned out to be a very fruitful discussion, and so I think it would be helpful.
Sure.
Okay. Anything else from IP2 or January 2nd info packet? All right. So normally at our work sessions, we do have council updates on assigned boards, commissions, and committees. Can we do that now?
Yeah.
It's not listed.
Yes.
How about you do it at the end of the formal? Don't we have an agenda item? That's
Yeah,
council
so we'll
time
do
or
that.
something? You can do it.
Okay. All right. Yep. All right. Be it there anything else for the work session that counselors want to address?
Just thank staff for sitting here through all this.
Yeah.
You probably figured, why didn't we get up and leave?
Yes. Thank you all so much. Anything else?
Thank you for all the work you do for the budget. This is really a lot of work. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Consider ourselves adjourned.